somebody that has an undiagnosed illness in this life or a pain that can't be solved by conventional medicine, or they can't really find a reason for it. What I find is that we bring them into a deep hypnotic state, we can go back and ask them to go to that source of that pain if it's beyond this current life. And I have found instances where they would recall a life as a Revolutionary War soldier that was shot in the hip by a 50 caliber slug. And in this life, they have sciatic nerve pain in her left leg, but they never damaged it in sports and MRIs and everything else can't determine why she has this pain. And we did some hypnotic regression work with her and, work to diminish that pain and take away that negativity or that trauma from that situation.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman. Glad you're here listening. That was David Rippy, and he's going to be talking to us today about his book that he just finished, his third book, The Immortal Soul. More about that in a second. And I want to take a second here to thank you for listening to the program and invite you to check out my website, theexplodinghuman.com. That's TheExplodingHuman.com. Come and check it out. It's got photos of all my guests, all my episodes, synopses, a little bio on myself, and a donate button if you want to donate to the show. That would be much appreciated. And I also want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be great because I'd love to start streaming some of these episodes live video. So if I get enough subscribers, that can happen. So that is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman on YouTube. Please subscribe to that show. That would be so great. And you can hear all the same episodes you can hear on whatever platform you're listening to this show. My guest today, as I mentioned earlier, is David Rippy. This is our third interview and his third book that he's written called The Immortal Soul. And we're going to be talking past life regression and hypnosis and some of the work he does with those things. And if you are skeptical, so are we. David and I both questioned these things, but we've both done these past life regressions. Interesting stuff. So we're going to be talking about that. And, answering the big questions. Why are we here? Will we see our loved ones again after they've passed? Will we be seeing them again? These are these sort of far-out questions that, most people don't want to talk about it all the time. I certainly don't. But when I do talk about it, I'm fascinated by it. And David is a fascinating guy. If you haven't heard David talk, he has done two previous interviews with me, and I keep having him back. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is David Rippy. This is the essence of the book for those people who have not read any of your materials.
We kind of looked at, some of the questions that have been asked since for thousands of years. That's like, why are we here? We lose a loved one. Will we see them again? Where do they go from here? And I always kind of pondered that myself and, thought there's probably more than just what we see with our five senses, like a sixth sense of some sort. And from there, we kind of went into and thought, what's a good way to bring forth the memories of if there is a past life? One of the things I got interested with as far as the topic of reincarnation was I wasn't really sure if it was real or not. So I wanted to kind of see to myself if it was. I was flipping through TV channels and I stopped on a channel. There was this lady that was on this TV show in the afternoon up here in Philadelphia who was hypnotizing three people that were on stage. And the first guy was just, your typical businessman, what he seemed like. And he recounted a life as a Chinese youth. And he talked about the various hamlet he lived in and the shoes they wore, what time this was, and just a lot of really neat details. And he did have a background in Chinese culture. He really didn't know much about China. And it was interesting to hear some of the things he did that, later on they looked back and said, wow, that was accurate. So when I saw that, I thought to myself, I'd like to try it, and did it.
What did you discover about yourself?
What was interesting was I went through a no, I wasn't sure, so I had never been hypnotized before. So at first, when she asked me questions, I wasn't quite sure if the images or information I was receiving was accurate. So I wasn't very forthcoming with answers. She would ask me my name, for instance, in that light, and I wasn't sure what it was. So I had nothing really to volunteer. And after she induced a deeper hypnotic state, things became clearer, and I pictured myself in a dark cabin sometime back in the 1860s, living outside of Kentucky, about 30 miles west of Lexington. And I knew my name was John Adam Miles. My wife was named Elizabeth, and I had a daughter, and they named me Catherine. So just a lot of details. As we went further into that life, it opened up more and more memories of where I was married, what I did for a living. There's things that were very interesting. I could even see some things in this life that I think filtered in from that life. One of them's kind of interesting. Just back then, Lexington was sort of the home of Jim Beam. It was founded outside of Lexington in 1830. So I'm not sure if that was really a connection, but it was just a strange thing. And what I find with past life regressions, not only my own, but in others' cases, is that we find similarities in this life that actually might have had their roots in an earlier life that we had.
The first question I had when you were saying this person's name, did you do research to see if this person existed? Were you able to do that?
What you find is that we haven't taken the efforts to really do a deep dive in. I mean, there is ancestry.com. You could find some records back then. And we have gone back and seen others that have actually gone back and proven. So in some of the cases, we have not taken that effort to do a deep dive. It takes effort and time to look these up. But one of the sources would be, for instance, would be the Department of Paranormal Studies at the University of Virginia. And what they've done on a scientific basis was it was a 30-year project where they would take young children that were between the ages like 4 to 7 or 8, and they would recount lives of how they were this, or this. And in many cases, they did prove that these children did have these lives. They had information that was impossible for them to really have. And then they did actually prove those lives. So they said in about 5,000 cases they did it, they stated, without any question that yes, these children did have these past lives. It was very interesting. So when you look at the research out there on proving the existence of past lives, what I find is that every year it seems to get stronger and stronger, especially as we move closer and closer understanding quantum theory and dimensional aspects and things like that.
The one time I did a past life regression, it wasn't as clear as what you're talking about. There was no name or anything like that, but it was way far back. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it was, maybe like ancient Mesopotamia or someplace like that. And I remember she had me look down at my feet, and I was in sandals, and there was a war going on, and I was out in the street. Um, like, I don't know what I was, some sort of a scribe or writer or something. And I was very upset because people were fighting and killing. And I remember sort of shouting, "This isn't the way to go. Don't do this." And I've always had this Intense fear of violence. Oh, that's why I'm so scared of it, because it was so intense then. And it might be that, it might not be that, but it felt very real. But not in the sense of like watching a movie and I could see everything clearly. It was kind of shadowy and more these images. But the other thing that was very powerful to me was I was taken out of that life and died. It wasn't anything like dramatic or anything like that. But when I came out of it, the main thing was that death wasn't not a big deal. That it was just part of the cycle, and that I was going to live again. That's what it felt like, and what it seemed very real. And it took away, whatever percentage of fear of death that I had. It really diminished it.
If reincarnation is real, I feel it is. What you find is a lot of people have memories of wars they were in, whether it goes back to the prehistoric, where we could be throwing spears at each other, kind of coming up through the world wars and even the Holocaust. And I had a person who recounted a life as being a Holocaust victim and actually being taken to Auschwitz and that whole thing. And it was pretty sad, and how they chose that life or those lessons. And what you find is that a lot of traumas that I have found come forward, I talked about some of the Immortal Soul, was that somebody that has an undiagnosed illness in this life or a pain that can't be solved by conventional medicine, or they can't really find a reason for it. What I find is that we bring them into a deep hypnotic state, we can go back and ask to go to that source of that pain if it's beyond this current life. And I have found instances where they would recall a life as a Revolutionary War soldier that was shot in the hip by a 50 caliber slug. And in this life, they have a sciatic nerve pain in her left leg, but they never damaged it in sports and MRIs and everything else can't determine why she has this pain. And we did some hypnotic regression work with her, and work to diminish that pain and take away that negativity or that trauma from that situation. In your case with Mesopotamia and looking at that war, if you went back and saw that again, it's almost like seeing a violent movie, say 10 times. After the first, second, third, 10th, eighth time, you're almost immune to it. And we work to diminish and take that trauma or that negativity out of the subconscious. You can pretty much take that memory to where it just doesn't even bother you anymore. You won't have that fear or phobia of violence.
Did the pain subside in this person that you were working with?
Yes, it did. And there was actually another case too, to where one had jaw pain. They had ruled out TMJ, her dentist. They had ruled out grinding of her teeth. But no, going back, it was actually in the Civil War. And I'm not sure if I mentioned the Revolutionary or the Civil, but it was a war, and literally saw herself. I didn't really see it, it happened so fast. But upon death, standing outside looking at her body, she saw that she had been hit in the face with a cannonball. It kind of tore up, obviously the majority of her left side of her head. And she saw that, described that, and that was the source of that she felt when he went to the source of that pain. So, a lot of times what you find is that if somebody had a traumatic ending, in other words, they didn't die a peaceful death in their bed, where they just kind of wake up into this new world, if they had a traumatic event happen to them, that a lot of times that seems to carry forward sometimes, still locked in your subconscious. We carry all the memories of all our lives within ourselves, within our soul, with our consciousness. By going into the subconscious, you can unlock those memories, find the source of that, and relieve that pain. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to look at is going forward. And I'd like to someday maybe do a book just based on that. But in the Immortal Soul, there's probably about 3 or 4 cases where there's some pain realized and what happened afterward.
Are these mostly case histories of things, people you've worked with?
These are all ones I've worked with.
Yeah.
Yes, the Immortal Soul. We had all those were just sort of clients that came to me. They could have been referrals, and they didn't come specifically for pain. But I like to ask anybody that comes first, what are the top 5, mental things that bother you, or traumas you've had, or things you don't like or you fear. and one of your five top physical ailments and things like that. And then, a little later on, if it's something like, well, something kind of serious where it's like a chronic thing, it just doesn't seem to ever go away. They've had it for years. That's what I'd ask them about, see if it's related to some type of a situation in a past life or it's traumatic.
And how do you take people deep? What is your process, if you can talk about that a little bit? Because I know that when I was hypnotized, that I was very aware of everything that's going on. It's not like, you know, something that you don't feel you have control over, because you do. And you can hear everything, and you're very aware of what's going on, but the skill of being able to take somebody deep like that seems like a profound thing to be able to do.
It varies person to person. A lot of the people I'd hypnotized had never been hypnotized before. But they did have, not all of them, but a lot of them had like a common practice of meditation. They were used to, find the ability to relax themselves, maybe to slow down the mind chatter from their day, where thoughts just keep coming in, they can't relax themselves. So a lot of them would come in, and also I kind of suggested that they might listen to, one of the guided meditation trance tapes I put out on YouTube ahead of time, just so they get a feel for my voice, get a feel for kind of the process. What I find is that you can bring them into what's called a super conscious state, which is beyond the regular hypnotic state. And how you would do that, or how I do it, is just sort of some proprietary techniques we use where I just bring them down deeper and deeper until they're so deep that I'll ask them some questions and they'll be able to start providing answers that are clear and concise.
I had an experience when I did hypnosis that I came into I did, I think, 7 sessions or something. And one of the sessions I came into, I had some very, I had a back spasm, and I had a lot of back pain when I got there. I was sort of, you know, it would be a day where I would probably have laid on my back with some ice or something. That's how much it hurt. But I was able to drive there, and I under hypnosis, the pain went completely away. And then when I came out of it, it was gone, which really showed me that that pain was not anything mechanical necessarily, that it was induced by my mind. And I started to do a little bit more research on back pain, which I don't have anymore. That there was a guy named John Sarno, who wrote a couple of books I read. One was Overcoming Back Pain and Mind Over Back Pain. And one of the things he said was that the pain is a lot worse than what's actually going on. And it's actually, most of the time, unless there's a mechanical issue with your body, that it's induced by stress, which obviously is induced by thought. And I was like, that's ridiculous, you know? And so one day after I read this book, I'm doing the strenuous activity of folding socks. And I'm folding socks, and I'm thinking about something. I can't remember. It was unpleasant. And all of a sudden, I just felt this spasm in my back, and it hurt a lot. And it was just like, people always say, oh, my back went out. Well, I wasn't doing anything. I was just thinking. And I thought my way into this thing, and I went, oh, this is actually a real thing. It's mind induced. And it was a really uh, strong lesson in the power of the mind for either positive or negative outcomes.
That's exactly right, Bob. And I had no idea the power of hypnosis until, and I talk about in the book early on, but it talks about how even in Boy Scouts, I saw my first demonstration probably when I was about 14 or 15. And one of the senior scouts hypnotized one of the younger scouts. And at first we all thought it was like one scout trying to get a joke over on another one. And we weren't sure if it was real or not. But he did the rigid arm thing, and we all tried to bend his arm. And it's not like this scout was super strong or anything, just an average scout. And under hypnosis, he could do that. He could handle pain. They were, we didn't want to test our friend too heavily under hypnosis, but they were sticking some pins in his arm, a little flame on the other side of his arm, and he just couldn't feel anything. It was really amazing.
when you talk about the immortal soul, what does that mean to you? And and you said, why are we here? What is this? Let's get into it. Why not?
There's, a lot of religions talk about, is the soul immortal? Is it not? We found a lot of early Christian thought came from the works of Plato, who talked about what he considered the immortal soul. And I think even in science today, what's interesting, even going back in the early 1900s, there was a doctor, a scientist who tried to measure the weight of the soul. Quantum theory has proven today that everything is just vibrating energy, vibrated in different, in different wavelengths and in different frequencies. But if the soul is energy, and we're energy, and you cannot destroy energy, it just comes back in another form. And that's what survives death. That would be your consciousness, your soul. So I go a little deeper than that, even where we come down, we have cosmic amnesia. We take on new lives, in other words, experience that we signed up for before we even incarnated into this life. So these lessons are things that we might want to learn patience. We might come down for, a lesson of patience where we take a hard life to where, where we're pretty much having to, wait on things that other people might want immediately. We could take on a life of compassion, where we see others that we could be helping somewhere. So there's a lot of very complicated things, and when I've talked to some of what I consider the most gifted people in this world, ones that have won international psychic challenges on, that just can't be explained. What you find is they think the world or the universe and under the universal laws, it runs on two things mostly. It's all love, which permeates from the highest makes you to the lowest. Um, it's also very mathematically oriented. In other words, basically about everything that we know, we see the advancements in math we've had with computers and such. But everything is pretty much coded, and you can even code, the entire human body, from down to the smallest ligaments, the blood, the recuperative powers, our minds, could all be put into a mathematical formula.
I feel like my brain can only go so far, and then it's just like, what is this? Not that it's not true, but it just feels like I don't, just as a human being with my limited brain and its limited use, it's amazing, it's fantastical, and I can't really comprehend it, which is maybe a good thing.
Well, I think, Bob, that, what's interesting, just looking at our own individual selves, okay, there's going to be a lot of things that, we know about ourselves in this life, for instance. We started off very young. We're growing up to where we are today. We've, gone through school, we've gone through careers, we've gone through experiences, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we just kind of look at that and look at things that in this life that we enjoy. We might enjoy music. We might be somehow good at drawing or something. And then a lot of times we go, are these natural talents that we develop now during this span of our current life, or are these things that we possibly brought into this life? And I think as an individual, we just sit back and just kind of look at it on a very, just a very individual level. Not only talents we might have brought in, also on the other side, people that we know, that some we feel very comfortable with, like we've known them forever. We might only know them 6 months or less. And a lot of times, what this is, these are souls that have come back to play some role in the life you're in now. And the way it's interwoven, that's why you see the mathematical need for that kind of type of complexity. You see how lives can be interwoven together to where they're now learning certain lessons at the same time you're learning lessons, and how will those lessons intermesh with each other. We have to kind of look and say, hey, these are more than just what we see in front of us. And I think we kind of try to pull that veil back, try to open those doors and other possibilities. I think we can grow not only as humans in this planet, but we can learn to recognize the interconnectivity of everything.
You were saying that the two things that the universe has is this mathematical interconnectedness and also love. And I know that when you lose somebody, they pass on, that love doesn't change at all. If there was love there, it's still there, and that seems very obviously to me a timeless thing that that can't be changed. It just is what it is. And I noticed that when I've lost people that I love, as they were getting ready to pass or whatever, that was the only thing left to say to them was I love you. That was it. There was really nothing else. All these sort of day to day, character things and annoyances and things that those just go away. And
That was well put, Bob. I really like that. You're right. Love, the thought of a loved one, the memories of a loved one, that's energy too. I mean, everything, like I said, every thought, every deed's energy. And that energy doesn't die. As you mentioned, that is timeless. That is something that will live forever. And the more people that love touches, the greater is that energy.
like, where does talent come from? That's sort of an interesting idea to me. It's like, let's say you're born into a family and they don't have any musical ability whatsoever. Yet there's somebody in that family that is a unbelievable musician and is just tapped into music and it just comes out of them and they're creative that way. And you're like, and you hear this a lot from parents, positive and negative. They'll say about one of their kids, I don't know where this one came from. You always hear that.
You're right. There's always sometimes that outlier. And where does that talent really originate? Does it originate in just some fluke in their mind where they had the ability to pick up this instrument and play like no one else? Or could that be that, they might have been, a blues singer in the 30s and they reincarnated back in the 60s and 70s? So I think that's an interesting thing to do. I think is the exploration of the person or ourselves comes forward. You know, Having some of these great individuals that have amazing talents in different fields, have them be hypnotized and see if that might have led back to something else or was just a fluke in this life. And I think in most cases it led to other lives where they did enjoy that want to come forward and do it again.
Yeah, I would imagine that it doesn't come from nowhere. And the other thing is, I wonder, I just thought of this when you were talking. What if you wanted to, let's say you were a musician, we'll just pick that as a talent, and you wanted to tap into that gift in a deeper way through hypnosis. I wonder if people do that too. It's like help me to go even deeper into this talent that I have. Open up my mind at the blocks between myself and the music. Where is that a possibility? I wonder.
It is possible because even today, I think what you're seeing is seeing sort of a move toward not only meditative enhancement tapes, but under a hypnotic situation, not only to realize that maybe you had a past life as a musician or you're Beethoven in a past life or a great singer. But looking forward is it possible to enhance those talents? And I think it is, just like you can take away pain. I think you could also obviously increase the latent abilities that you might already have. So yeah, I think it could open up new pathways. Uh, I know that even on the government side, training, for example, training drone pilots. When they started making all these drones, they didn't have enough people to fly. They could actually recognize targets and recognize locations. And they found that they would put magnets on the side of their head. They're doing that today. Um, and as a result, having this little headband of magnets all look very simple, no big deal. They could actually train a person to be from an average pilot to be an expert pilot within about 45 minutes of wearing that. And then once they took it off, that talent did go away. So that's what they can do today. Your brain's electromagnetic. When you introduce hypnotic suggestions deep into the subconscious, these thoughts are being generated through words that I'm giving them. And yeah, you can unleash I think hidden avenues of abilities as well as take away those areas that have experienced pain and trauma.
I'm not the first person to even say this, obviously, but that we're somehow taking this consciousness and melding things with computers. We're almost becoming this other species in a way, and it's in some ways it's very positive, in some ways it's not. But the idea that, when you say it's mathematical and it's love, which is to me is the highest consciousness, when those things are starting to meet and becoming, I don't know, is that part of the way that the human race is evolving? I'm not sure, but I know people have talked about it.
When you look at a species, you have to kind of look and say, has their technological advancements gotten ahead of their moral beliefs, and that's where you run into problems. And are we creating, humanoid like technological robots that have these amazing skills that are devoid of pain going forward, where you can stay awake for 24 hours straight, totally alert. And then, that's maybe some of the darker side of the possibilities, depending on how you use that ability.
I always wonder if it's possible for humans as a species to evolve to a place where they can handle things in a way that is productive and not destructive. And so far, the success rate is pretty low.
Or is there something more to this? Is there something more that our conscious is housed within that can do great things? And can we take off these cosmic blocks off our consciousness to see the entirety of who we are? And I think that as more people approach that possibility or that thought, then I think you'll begin to see where there's more of an evolved species to where the interconnectivity of all is recognized. So I think if we look at just the ability of the mind and the infinite possibilities, it's free will. We come down and take life lessons, and we have that choice, that free will. Are we going to do something good for someone or others, or abuse that power?
Hopefully, the people that are trying to do the work that you're trying to do, energy wise, will overcome those who that they'll take less people like that to overcome the other side.
That's funny you mentioned that, Bob, because they do. What's interesting is they've done various studies where, and I'm sure you probably heard of a couple of these, like where they get like 8,000 people together in one city, get them to like pray and meditate on, lack of violence, lack of robberies, or a million people would get together and pray at once around the world. It's sort of a common theme. It can take less soul energy or less individuals doing that same thing to bring about a greater change because it is at a higher frequency than a lower dense frequency. And love is the highest vibration there is, to where ego, fear, greed is the lowest vibration. So if you have a lot operating at a lower vibration, even less operating at a higher vibration can't bring that change. And that's what you mentioned. That's exactly right, I think.
I am always fascinated with this stuff. I've chosen to. I don't disbelieve anything. I am open to all this stuff, and I've had enough experiences in my life that were not explainable by you know uh, the earthly kind of cognitive explanations that most people require if to say something is real or not real. So I love it, and I think that your work and your books are really valuable to people. Let's tell our audience all your books. The Immortal Soul is the most recent, and David Rippy's written that, but you have two other books. Why don't you tell us what those are and talk about your tapes and your website so people can find you and experience the David Rippy phenomena.
The first book I wrote was sort of a recollection of a memoir I wrote about my own life and journey from being a young college graduate, going on and starting a career with a Fortune 50 company, and then 3 weeks later being in a tragic car accident, and as a result, it left me paralyzed from the shoulders down. So I recounted that journey and how I had to kind of pretty much start at ground zero and try to reinvent myself. Um, I was 25. I was young. I was still ambitious. Fortunately, I didn't suffer a lot head trauma, even though my parents might argue that point sometimes to put it on. So we talked about that journey of kind of that reinventing of myself to be able to go and get a job. And I was fortunate enough to get a job with Merrill Lynch. And I went on to Vanguard and had a successful career managing money for like high net worth individuals. I wanted to provide some type of a book or a guide that other people could benefit from. So I wrote Powering Through Paralysis, how to survive and thrive with disability and disease. And that was pretty much an account of 16 chapters on how to hire assistants, how to set goals, how to find acceptance, how to stay healthy. I put a chapter on meditation in there. And I also put a chapter on hypnosis in there. I want to give people an idea of what hypnosis could do. I wrote it, what I found through years of living with spinal cord injury and try to change, try to help people out of the gate as opposed to try to figure it out through trial and error. Kind of save some time, so to speak.
Just going to tell the audience that I have 2 previous interviews with David Rippy where we talk about both of those books that he has written previous. So check those out. And do you do have a website if people want to go find more to find more things about you?
Yeah, it's on davidrippy.com. So
Okay.
just my name, davidrippy.com. And I put on the tapes on there that are available. You just put on your earbuds and click on one of them. And, they range, the hypnotic recordings are for chronic pain for men, women, insomnia, addiction, stress, anxiety, all that.
Yeah. I listened to the stress tape. I liked it a lot. I think you sent me that one. I really liked it. And yeah, you have a very soothing voice. So that I'm sure that's very helpful.
It probably doesn't hurt. But anyway, I know it might be too soothing, though. I've had some talks. My father was funny when he was sitting in the kitchen once. We're talking about stocks and things like that. And next thing you know, I'm going in this economic dissertation or whatever. And all of a sudden I hear snoring. I fell asleep at the table.
Well, I'm wide awake. I've enjoyed our talk once again. This is our 3rd one, and I'm so pleased to talk to you. And I'm gonna say thank you once again.
Well, thank you, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity, and always great catching up with you.
You too. Much appreciation, folks, for listening to the show, and also appreciate having David Rippy on. And he's working on another book, and we're going to be talking to him when that thing comes out. So, wow. He is a font of knowledge, an interesting gentleman. I never met anybody quite like David, so looking forward to talking to him again. I want to invite you guys to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Make sure you add the with Bob Nickman. And go to that YouTube channel and just hit subscribe. Doesn't cost anything. It's just a way to get some subscribers so I can start streaming some live video. So I think that'll be great. Thank you for listening, and see you again.